Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you as always for stopping by. Let me start with a short bio of Rebecca Miano, who was our guest, along with some other Kenyan officers at Mindspeak last Friday. We're just editing the entire presentation. But take a listen to this. It's a little bit of her personal story. And then have a listen to this interview with Hamid Rashid, who's the founder and CEO of Finterra. And they've got this whole blockchain going. And it was very interesting to hear up close and personal from a practitioner in multiple jurisdictions, Singapore, Malaysia, the Middle East, and here in Kenya. Very interesting gentleman, and really sort of simplified it for me in particular. Macro thoughts: behold the sudden stop. Risk of emerging markets collapse looms. This is a headline on Zero H. It could be the arrival of a sudden stop, as I explain in Escape from the Central Bank Trap. A sudden stop happens when the extraordinary and excessive flow of cheap US dollars into emerging markets suddenly reverses and funds return to the US looking for safer assets. And this was a scenario that I was sort of forecasting severally. The last time I forecasted was on the 5th of February when I wrote a piece that I called Halcyon Days. And I said Wikipedia has an article on Halcyon Days, and it reads thus: from Latin Alcyone, daughter of Iulius and the wife of Ceyx. When her husband died in a shipwreck, Alcyone threw herself into the sea, whereupon the gods transformed them both into Halcyon birds. When Alcyone made her nest on the beach, waves threatened to destroy it. Aeolus restrained his winds and kept them calm during 7 days in each year, so she could lay her eggs. These became known as the Halcyon Days, when storms do not occur. Today the term is used to denote a past period that has been remembered for being happy and or successful. And what I was forecasting then was exactly this: the end of that Halcyon period, particularly for emerging market assets. And look at this: EM currency rout continues, dollar keeps gaining. That's a chart from Holger. And I'd also warned in September 2016, when I wrote a piece called Mirrors on the Ceiling, the Pink Champagne on Ice. I was quoting the song Hotel California, Mirrors on the Ceiling, the Pink Champagne on Ice. And she said, we are all just prisoners here of our own device. Last thing I remember, I was running for the door. I had to find the passage back to the place I was before. Relax, said the nightman. We are programmed to receive. You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave. What is clear, I said then, was we're at the fag end of this party. Hotel California, I've learned, has had 144,324,402 views as of this morning. This is interesting. As the euro hits its weakest levels versus the dollar in 2018, it's worth noting that emerging market debt has been heavily correlated to the fate of the euro. Look at this chart. Emerging market dollar sovereign debt is off to its worst start to a year on record. That's another concern. That's why the African issuers did well to issue early and quick and big. Swiss franc, this is what happens to a currency when its central bank decides to charge people negative 0.70 interest to hold its currency. This is Peter Brandt. In case you missed it, the euro has quietly printed a fresh year-to-date low of 118.98. Early New York trading as King Dollar marches ahead. We're now at 119.28. It could bounce as high as 120.40, frankly, but I think it's headed lower. Median age by continent. This is the story I was referring to in my piece over the weekend, Africa Calling. Home thoughts: we are all wired into a survival trip now. That's Gonzo Weiss tweeting Hunter S. Thompson. Fisher Creative Sunset over Lingtran and Kumbutse. This is on Mount Everest. I've been following these photographs from Ben Fogel's Twitter handle. The photograph unveiled today for the Tag Heuer Don't Crack Under Pressure campaign is probably the most powerful shot that I have taken. This is David Yarrow venturing into the commercial sphere. Normally, of course, we appreciate his elephants in particular. I have taken an iconic image yet. I'll let others decide, but I do know that the photograph unveiled today for the Tag Heuer Don't Crack Under Pressure campaign is probably the most powerful shot that I've taken. Political reflections. Trump said he will announce his Iran decision today at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. That's how the timeline of the Iran deal looks like via Barclays. He tweeted, "I will be announcing my decision on the Iran deal tomorrow from the White House at 2 p.m. And then John White tweeted, "Rome has spoken, the matter is finished, Iran, Trump." Lee Sachs says EU diplomats say they've failed to convince Trump on Iran deal, say Trump expected to withdraw. Simon Sharma tweets, the Paleo Hawk strategy is to ditch the agreement, to present another quasi-ultimatum known in advance to be unacceptable to the Iranians, which then delivers in their mind a casus belli, except Europeans won't have any part of it. This is currently where we are now. Of course, this is a far cry from 2013 when I was writing about Barack Obama and Hassan Rouhani. And I was saying then that the recent rapprochement, and of course now ended and reverting to the mean, between the President Obama and Iran's Hassan Rouhani has certainly snapped a losing sequence in US-Iranian relations that goes all the way back to the Iranian Revolution in 1979, when Ayatollah Khomeini overthrew Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the Shah of Iran. Then I was writing, if the Pax Americana and the Middle East were a three-legged stool, with the US the most important leg, then Israel and Saudi Arabia are the other two legs of that stool. I said then, neither Riyadh nor Tel Aviv are aligned with President Obama's Iranian rapprochement, and indeed they worked hard to get us to the point we are here. Latest example was that quite extraordinary, but we've been used to extraordinary interventions by Bibi Netanyahu. It's something like late night TV, isn't it? Commodity markets, oil powers ahead. Brent actually got above $76, and that chart is from JS Blockland. WTI is back above 70 at $70.11. It's going to be highly volatile now over the next few sessions, because of the expectations around the Iran deal. But remember, it's ramped up a great deal on this on the repricing of this risk. The president is as committed to regime change as we are, Giuliani said. I mentioned this yesterday, and the State Department spokesperson, Heather Nauert, says he speaks for himself and not on behalf of the administration on foreign policy. Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani said, "I'm focused on the law more than the facts right now," according to CNN. And he's been another extraordinary intervention as well, hasn't he? And I think he's trying to get to the point where everyone says it's such a shit show, we can't prove anything. And it's just, like Inspector Clouseau. I think that's the strategy, at least. Israeli minister, if Iran attacks from Syria, Assad's blood is forfeit. If Assad allows Iran to turn Syria into a military vanguard against us to attack us from Syrian territory, he should know that that would be the end of him, the end of his regime. So some pretty hard-hitting comments there. Malaysia holds a general election on Wednesday, worth keeping an eye on. Vladimir Putin has been sworn in as president of Russia, and I was just going through back the articles I've written. The latest one was on the 16th of April this year, when I said in Syria, war drums, and Putin was cornered like a rat, it seemed. I was asking what happens next, referencing his book from 2000, when he's talking about the meaning of the word cornered. There, on that stair landing, I got a quick and lasting lesson in the meaning of the word cornered. There were hordes of rats in the front entryway. My friends and I used to chase them around with sticks. Once I spotted a huge rat and pursued it down the hall until I drove it into a corner. It had nowhere to run, and suddenly it lashed around and threw itself at me. I was surprised and frightened. Now the rat was chasing me. Jumped across the landing and down the stairs. And I was just saying, from a geopolitical point of view, it seemed terribly boxed in Syria. December 2016, I was writing about the parabolic rebound of Vladimir Putin. I was referencing a seriously digital program of interference which amplified the Trump candidacy. October 2015, the day he spoke at UNGA before the intervention, I was calling him the geopolitical grandmaster because he faced down Obama's oil warfare. He was reasserting Russia's role. So you can see it's incredible. Swings on the chart. These are photographs this is a photograph from Getty Images of him being sworn in. What is driving dollar strength, particularly against the euro, is this. There was a delayed feedback onto the currency, but we've got it now. But it was the spread between US 10-year yields and the German yield has widened to 242 plus basis points. Which is the highest level since April 1989, the year of the fall of the Berlin Wall. Dollar index, this is a chart from Chigel, 92.84 last I checked. I think it's still going higher towards 94.50. Let's move on to the currency markets. Euro dollar 119.20, dollar index 92.84, still going higher in my view. Japanese yen 108.98. Swiss franc 10032, the pound 135.75. Goodness, people were so bullish at one point, and now we've just given it all up. Australian dollar, let's take a look at where that might be. 1 second. That's at 75.08. India rupee 67.255. Oil price pressuring that. South Korean won actually quite firm, 1078.43. The Rial 355.07. Egyptian pound 17.7120, that's behaving well as well. The rand, and unfortunately, it's caught up in this bout of dollar strength. We're still sitting around 12.56. Let's keep an eye on it, and then we can add into it when we feel that the general conditions are better. Commodity markets, oil powers ahead. Brent actually got above $76, and that chart is from JS Blockland. For the Brent chart, WTI is back above 70 at $70.11. It's going to be highly volatile now over the next few sessions because of the expectations around the Iran deal. But remember, it's ramped up a great deal on this on the repricing of this risk. This is a WTI crude oil chart from Lisa Abramovitz, all about Iran. Basically, it could rise a lot further, or it could drop quite steeply if Trump turns out to be barking and not biting. But we don't know that. I'm inclined to think he's going to dump it. $1,313 on gold, feeling the pressure from a stronger dollar. This is interesting. As the euro hits its weakest levels versus the dollar in 2018, it's worth noting that emerging market debt has been heavily correlated to the fate of the euro. Look at this chart. Emerging market dollar sovereign debt is off to its worst start to a year on record. That's another concern. That's why the African issuers did well to issue early and quick and big. Africa Calling was my piece over the weekend. I said, of course, Africa is not a country. In fact, the continent is seriously non-linear. Booms and busts quite often occur simultaneously. However, what is clear is that the demographic surge, the overwhelming nature of the numbers of this born-free generation. And I was saying, people talk about African millennials, but actually more than 51% of Africans are below 19 years of age. And I'm saying all this is creating a more homogeneous African because of the mobile phone, the arrival of the information century, which started with the mobile phone. Then the mobile internet triggered a process of binding Africans closer to their fellow Africans. Once upon a time, when I was a young boy, we had one of the few landlines in Mombasa. That was my connection to the world. Today, I and millions like me know what is happening in real time across this massive continent of ours. What has occurred in the last 2 decades is surely a revolution whose velocity continues to gather speed. And when you look at the graph, which started at practically zero, it's a little dizzying. I would like to write a book about it sometime. But I did a video of that article, if you're interested, called it Africa Calling. The African Development Bank is leading talks with Zimbabwe and its creditors to make plans for the nation to pay off some of its arrears. Obviously, they are going to thread that needle at some point. South African all shares down 2.73% year to date. Dollar versus rand, as I said, the rand has softened up a bit because of dollar strength. So let's just sit on the sidelines. Our average is a little bit off market of 12.35. Let's not stress right now. Egyptian pound 17.7120. That's been pretty steady. Champagne consumption is part of the culture in Lagos. It is not a Lagos party. There are no champagne bottles being popped. According to a recent McKinsey report, Africa has the world's youngest population. We know that. The 16 to 34 age group now accounts for roughly 55% of income. Champagne consumption is part of the culture in Lagos. It is not a Lagos party. If there are no champagne bottles being popped, it's actually turned into a competition where clubbers try to out-pop each other. Euromonitor report also uncovered that Nigeria had the fastest growing rate of new champagne consumption in the world, second only to France and ahead of rapidly growing Brazil and China, as well as established markets such as the United States and Australia. Very interesting article, Forbes. It's on a link. That helped drive yields on local bonds down about 400 basis points since late August. This is in Nigeria, where you've had a sharp reduction in borrowing costs. Nigerian all shares up 7.82% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange, second best after Ukraine, that's up 35.12%. Ethiopian Airlines is to step up expansion with more deals and jets. This is an article in Reuters. Plan has been to more than double its fleet to 120, become Africa's biggest airline by 2025. Already has 100 planes flying to dozens of destinations from Asia to South America, including 4 US cities. Outpaced regional competitors Kenya Airways and South African Airways to become Africa's largest airline by revenue and profit. We've expanded more than we planned. We have to revise the objective to make it 150 airplanes or more by 2025. In 2016-2017, Ethiopian Airlines generated $2.7 billion in revenue, up more than 11% from the previous year. Passenger numbers climbed by more than 18% to 9 million. Net profit was $233 million. They've really gone after this aggressively. And then, of course, they've had this acquisition-based policy where they've been buying up stakes in other airlines. Going forward, it will be difficult for us to compete with only one hub in Addis Ababa. That was interesting. And then talking about poor cash flow, can't repatriate more than $145 million in profits from Angola, Sudan, and Zimbabwe because of foreign exchange shortages, which is an irony because there's a massive foreign exchange shortage in Ethiopia itself. Kenyans abroad sent home a record $641.5 million in the first 3 months of the year, compared with $432.6 million the previous year. A big surge. As I've said before, remittances are indeed a wonderful silver bullet. Our inward remittances have been accelerating to fresh all-time highs. And this speaks fundamentally to Kenya Inc.'s intellectual capital and monetization thereof. Over the weekend, in my piece, Africa Calling, I said Safaricom is a need, not a want. I was suggesting that investors should buy the dip, add to the position if we really act lower on the results, because the second half will have been quite soft, I assume. Let me loop back now to Safaricom, which we're reporting as full-year earnings Wednesday morning. I don't need to remind you of Safaricom's centrality to the fortunes of the Nairobi Securities Exchange. Safaricom has a market cap of about $11.2 billion, which is about 43% of the total value of the securities exchange. Therefore, this is the big beast of earnings releases at the exchange. After hitting a record high on April 5, Safaricom corrected 20% through Friday morning. Citibank was surely the catalyst with a skeptical earnings report. Safaricom, however, has provided every Kenyan with an entry ticket into the 21st century. I remember being at a function last year with Jack Ma, and when he was posed the question, what about our infrastructure? And boy, it's not that great right now with the rains, particularly on the roads. And he said, but what is the most important infrastructure of them all? It is the information highway, yours is fast. And this is the important point. Safaricom democratized. There's a price to it, of course, but they democratized access to the global economy and gave everyone a ticket and said, you pay for it and you can go. And a lot of people have. And that's why I say it's a need, not a want. And I think you add to the position if we react, there's a knee-jerk reaction lower tomorrow. I'll be at the results. I'll be having an interview with Satish at about 10:15. I really believe they've built the superhighway. Everyone else is still playing the tarmacking game, in my view. You know what I mean. Just take a look outside my office. Safaricom reported first half results where net income expanded 9.5%, basic EPS was up 9%, and customer numbers grew 10.8%. Mobile data customers up 13.5%, M-Pesa customers up 9.5%. And the fastest growing bits were obviously mobile data revenue, which expanded 31%. Everyone will be looking at that. It's still only at 17.55 billion. It's got a lot of headroom. M-Pesa revenue up 16.2%. And that's still strong double digits. It'll be interesting to see if the second half to election period slowed anything down there. But for me, I think this is more a conviction trade. It's just the fact that it's not. You can't look at it as purely a telco. You've got to look at it in the context of what I'm saying. They built the highway. They continue to invest in it. You can potter around on Airtel. You're just not in the game. So there you go. So I'm a buyer. I think that this is an opportunity to buy it on a correction. Jack Ma's finance giant is now larger than Goldman Sachs, but is he getting too big for Beijing? Indeed. Look at this photograph. Privileged to open the wing of St. Patrick's Primary School in Kaweze, Makueni County today, following support from the Irish organisation Kenya Child Foundation is the friend of the Irish ambassador. But look at the rains, what it's done. Nairobi all shows up 4.7% year to date. It's corrected 8.8% since setting a record high on April 5th, which was coincident with the record high of Safaricom. NSE 20 down 1.1%. And the final link on the web page, Rich Wrap-Ups, is a link where you can dive into any stock that's listed here in Nairobi. Once again, thank you for stopping by.